Hey guys, Dustin here. Welcome to another episode of Horroritis. It is a new year, new video. We should probably cover something new. No, we're not doing that. Instead, we're going to deep dive into something that's a personal favorite of mine, Return of the Living Dead. Now, I know I've done a Return of the Living Dead video already. In fact, I've done two. I've done part 1 and part 2. But now I want to cover the entire series. You may not know this, but there are actually 5 movies in that franchise, and I want to take them all together and just kind of dive deep and explore how they all relate to each other and how they hold up as a franchise in general. I'm hoping to actually do this to a lot of different franchises, so if this turns out well, you can look forward to more. So let's go ahead and jump in. Now, the first Return of the Living Dead was responsible for a few things that we, as zombie movie lovers, take for granted, such as fast zombies. That's a big one. It was also the first movie to use the actual word zombie outside of a few voodoo flicks, and to this day, it's still one of the few that actually does. Another is brains. Zombies didn't eat brains until Return of the Living Dead, and even now, present day, when somebody references a zombie movie, it's usually in the form of eating brains. Eating brains has kind of become synonymous with zombies, even though eating brains doesn't really happen outside of the Return of the Living Dead series. Return of the Living Dead set up a whole set of rules that we had never seen before and would continue to see after. Today we're taking a look at the world that the Return of the Living Dead created and how well the sequels were able to maintain it. In the first movie, the zombies are created by a chemical called 2,4,5-trioxin, which was originally created to help fight the war on drugs. An unintended side effect of this chemical was that it reanimated dead bodies, so the government decided to take those reanimated dead bodies, along with the rest of the chemical, stuff them into barrels, and ship them off for destruction. Some of those barrels were accidentally shipped to a medical supply warehouse in Kentucky, and that's where our first zombie outbreak happens. Once the gas is released, the events of the first movie are set into motion, and we learn that the zombies, for all intents and purposes, are indestructible. In fact, the only way to kill them is to burn them, but that in turn releases the chemical into the atmosphere, which causes acid rain, which rains down and reanimates even more corpses. These zombies, in addition to being fast, are also smart. They know what they're doing, they know why they're doing it, and they know how to articulate it.
Why do you eat people?
Not people. Brains.
They're capable of planning, often hiding just out of sight until the prey is ready for attack, and then they all tend to swarm in all at once. This isn't across the board, however, as some zombies seem more mindless and impulse-driven. We also learned that exposure to the gas causes living people to become violently ill before they die, then reanimate and eat brains. Now, these zombies are aware of their situation, their surroundings, and their need for brains. In fact, they maintain just about everything they had when they were alive, only now they have an unstoppable urge to eat brains.
And one thing only that can leave this world safe.
What, Freddy? What?
Alive?
From here, we can assume that a zombie's abilities are directly tied to their level of decomposition. Take, for example, the Tar Man, who's a holdover from the experiments in the 60s. He's been sealed in a canister for about 20 years, and when he's released, he's kind of half gone and, slimy and falling apart. While not in the best shape, we can assume that being locked in a canister for 20 years would keep the oxygen out and therefore keep the body from decomposing too much, which would explain why he can say simple things like more brains or use tools. These are the rules of the universe that every following Return of the Living Dead movie should theoretically follow. So let's jump into Return of the Living Dead Part 2 and see how that holds up. Now, Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is quite different in style and look and tone, and a lot of that can be contributed to different director, different writer. I think the budget was smaller, stuff like that. But that's going to happen across all the movies, so it's not a big deal. What matters here are the rules, so let's see how it holds up. The first thing we have is the canister 2,4,5 trioxin, so that's a good start. When the canister is busted open, we get living people exposed to the gas, which makes them violently ill and eventually turn into zombies. So we're still on the right track there. It should be noted that the second movie takes place in a different town years later, and nobody has any knowledge of the events of the first movie, which means that the government has taken care of it, cleared it up, buried it, and that a zombie outbreak is not an apocalypse event like you might expect. This movie also has its own version of the Tar Man, which sets a new expectation that every other movie should also have a Tar Man of some sort. The zombies in this movie are a little slower, a little dumber. Our rampaging horde has been reduced to kind of a shuffling mob. The smarter zombies have been reduced to just a few clever quips here and there. And in fact, some zombies are even mesmerized by a TV with a workout video on it. But this movie does fall pretty hard on the comedic side, so we could almost chalk it up to that.
3 against sides. 1, 2, 3. Now single count front up.
In this movie, we also have a way to kill the zombies, aside from burning them, which would release the toxins into the atmosphere, causing acid rain, which rains down and reanimates more corpses. In this one, you can just electrocute them, and somehow that works. On a side note, though, in the first movie, the chemical, of course, had to reach the corpses. You know, they would burn the bodies, it would go into the atmosphere, cause acid rain, and the bodies didn't reanimate until that rain actually soaked down into the dirt and coated the bodies, and then they would animate and dig themselves out. In the second movie, just the gas kind of floating across the ground in the cemetery is enough to animate the corpses. I don't really see this as breaking the universe as much as questionable writing for the sake of pacing. They needed to get those bodies moving, and they knew that nobody would really care. Except me. I care. Return of the Living Dead 3, quite possibly the most 90s zombie movie to ever exist. Again, we learn that the events of the last movie have been swept under the rug due to the fact that the government now has control of the 2,4,5 trioxin and is using it to try to create super soldiers. So, again, we're working with the trioxin, which is good. We learn through exposition that the zombies, once again, are indestructible. There's no mention of being electrocuted in the second movie. But while we get back on that rule, we start to break away from everything else. We learn in this movie that being bitten by a zombie turns you into a zombie. This doesn't really fit because the zombie-creating agent has been, and still is in this movie, the 2,4,5 trioxin. So, being bitten by a zombie, zombieism spread by bite, is viral, when before it's always been chemical. Those are two different processes. So not only are we breaking the rules of the universe with this one, but also breaking something that we've established literally 5 minutes before. And this is kind of a big break in this movie, considering that, like, the main zombie is turned by the trioxin, and literally everyone else in the movie is turned by bite. This is also the first movie in the franchise that doesn't have a Tar Man, so that sucks. I mean, there's this melty-faced guy, but he's no Tar Man. The zombies in this movie are kind of hard to pin down. It feels like they're smart, but like in an over-the-top, cartoony kind of way. There's also only a handful of zombies, so we don't really get to see how they act in like large groups or really see their ability to plan at all. There's no one in this movie that's exposed to the trioxin while they're alive. Our main zombie is exposed only minutes after death, and she wakes up mostly herself. It takes her a while to figure out what's wrong with her. She wakes up, she's really hungry, but she doesn't know why. It takes a while before she figures out what that is, but even then, I'm not entirely sure what that is. Up to this point, zombies have gone after brains, and they've explained why in the first movie. In this movie, someone's bit on the arm, someone's bit on the neck, a guy gets his spine pulled out. There's actually only one instance of anybody eating brains, and that's because the guy had been shot in the face and his brains were already out.
Brains. Brains.
It also seems that the hunger can be staved off with pain. Once our main zombie figures this out, she wastes no time in slicing, poking, and piercing herself with random objects and glass. Whoever made this movie had a very specific fetish. I'm not judging, just stating the obvious. Return of the Living Dead 4 and 5. These go on the list together because these movies were actually made to go together. Return of the Living Dead 5 is actually a direct sequel to 4 and even keeps some of the main cast. This would be refreshing if these movies didn't suck so bad. But who cares if the dialogue is wooden, the dubbing is bad, key plot elements are just thrown out for who knows why, and they both feel like sci-fi originals. That's not why we're here. We're here for the rules, damn it. We're still working with the 2,4,5-trioxin, except in this movie it's now called trioxin 5. That's easy enough to accept. It's still trioxin. I'm good with that. What's not easy to accept is that now headshots are a thing that works. This takes away one of the key features that made the original movie so scary. There was a certain hopelessness, feeling that no matter what you did, there was very little chance of winning, almost none. That was an amazing thing. Also, turning from a bite is still a thing in 4 and 5, and in 5 they introduced turning from a scratch. So that's... I don't know what that is. That's stupid. The zombies in this movie, however, are back to eating brains, or at least saying the word brains. In 4, they actually acknowledge the existence of zombies, and it's understood that the public knows about them and that zombie outbreaks happen, and that when they do, there are people who now take care of it. So, again, this falls in line with the zombies do not equal apocalypse.
Whenever there is an outbreak of zombie reanimation, Hybridtech leads the charge in containment.
The zombies in 4 or 5 are more mindless than any of the other ones before. There's a couple of homeless people that are exposed to the gas, and they turn pretty quickly. It's not drawn out like in the other movies. And they're pretty mindless. They're not great zombies. There's also a cooked rat. The homeless guys were cooking a rat before they were exposed, and the rat comes back to life, which is the first time we've seen a reanimated animal since the split dog in the original. In 5, the trioxin is turned into a party drug similar to MDMA, and the people who take it slowly turn into zombies. These zombies are a little bit smarter, with the ability to hide and in some cases use hand-to-hand combat. The predatory mentality is pretty much non-existent. The party zombies, once they turn, they kind of wander through a crowd of living partygoers, but they only attack 1 or 2 people. Couple that with headshots still being a thing, and these zombies are pretty tame. In fact, in the 5th movie, they should not have gotten as far as they did. There is a tar man, but we don't actually see him until the 5th movie, and then only for a couple shots. He doesn't try to kill anybody. In fact, he actually tries to hitchhike to this rave that everything takes place at. But he's there. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So it seems that the only rule that stays consistent throughout these 5 movies is that trioxin plays some part in creating the zombies. Out of all of them, I'd have to say the original is still the best, and that's because the original sets all the ground rules, but it also lays a firm foundation for some truly scary movies. The story was amazing, but the best part, the thing that really made 1 and 2 stand out above all of them, and 1 stand out the most, in my opinion, and these are what the movies got right the most, is the group of survivors. In the first 2 movies, these survivors were all strangers. They were people that, under normal circumstances, would have nothing to do with each other, and we take these people and we smash them together and we stick them under pressure, and we watch how they work together or fall apart and, try to survive. In the movies after this, it's all the survivors know each other, or, they are familiar with each other, and that dynamic is not there, and I think those movies are actually weaker for it. It's an amazing source of tension and drama, and it's just good storytelling, even if the second movie was a bit silly. I think all of the other movies could have benefited with this type of situation. It honestly should have been a rule of the universe, but again, it wouldn't have been stuck to because the only rule that was followed was the trioxin. So that was my deep dive into the Return of the Living Dead franchise. If you liked this, let me know, and I will do more on other franchises. Let me know which franchise you'd like me to do. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe on wherever you're seeing this. We are now available on YouTube, Facebook, and BitChute. So wherever you find it, like it, subscribe it, whatever you got to do. And until next time, I'm Dustin. This was Horroritis. Keep it creepy.